All right, folks, I'm back and wanted to give a quick introduction in 12 seconds or more of Rushia Brown, who I'm super fired up to have her here in the club room, as you know, brought to you by the Win Again Academy. And again, with lots of support from Every Kid Sports, a fantastic organization that supports kids wanting to play a sport. And they will offer up to $150 for every child, every kid to play a sport. So no excuses, parents, get your children to play sports. It's so important for them in so many different ways. So anyway, we're going to jump in and bring in Rushia. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about her. She was born in the Bronx. But she decided to move. I don't think she decided, but her family decided to move down to South Carolina, where she was raised down there. She started playing hoops back in high school as a sophomore and became so good at it, set bajillion different records and all kinds of things, and then was recruited by Harvard, by Duke, by UNC and others, but she stayed home and went to Furman. Now, all she did was kind of crush everything on the planet at Furman, including getting her number 34 retired and raised to the rafters so no one else can wear that number. But also became a professional, played in the WNBA for Cleveland for several seasons. I think it was 6 years, and played a year also in Charlotte. But then she also played overseas. And how cool is that to play in 5 different countries? She played in Spain. She played in Italy. She played in Greece. She played in Korea. I think there's one more. I think France. Oh my God, how awesome would that be to play overseas? Well, we'll ask her about that. But since she left her sport, she's the founder and the president of I want to make sure I get this right, the WPBAA, which is the Women's Professional Basketball Alumni. I think there should be an association after that. Maybe there is. Anyway, but they specialize in career transition, higher education, philanthropic engagement, and spiritual and mental well-being, which includes mental health. Anyway, we're going to talk about the passion principles today. She's going to tell you all about those and how to be the exception and not the rule. Oh my God, that was way more than 12 seconds, but let me bring you in, Rushia, and you can tell us a lot more about that. Sorry about the long intro.
Hello, Mark. Thank you so much. And yes, you did not cut it down to 12
seconds. And
you're
muted right now. There we go. No, you're good now. Okay, sorry.
As I was saying, thank you so much for having me on. And you failed the 12 seconds. You didn't quite get it, but I'll let it pass this time.
So thanks for coming in here, though. I truly appreciate it because I just you've got so much sort of advice, insight, and you've experienced a lot. And in your 26 years. You're 26 years old, right? I think give or take, right?
Just a few. Mm-hmm.
Give or take. But the point being that you've played overseas, which I think is such an important thing because one thing I've noticed with all sports is that there's a definite big time difference between playing in the United States and playing in a country that you don't necessarily know their culture, their language, everybody else around you, you can be a fish out of water a little bit. Doesn't matter the sport, but when you play in a different country or if Russian hockey players are playing here and that sort of thing. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I guess first things first, one thing I like to talk about with everybody is their experience leaving their sport, their playing days, and when they retire to what they did next and what they're doing now. Tell me a little bit about your experience when you finally decided, okay, I've dribbled for the last time officially in a game, and how you decided what to do next.
So the two were very different scenarios in the sense that when I decided I wasn't playing anymore, I literally just played the most successful season I'd ever had internationally. I played for a team in France where we'd won 5 championships in 1 year based on the Euro Cup, the National League, the different cups. And I had been fighting nagging injuries, and it was just so traumatic to even get to that point. And I remember being at the celebration party going, this is it. I can't keep doing this. Because I'd been playing 7 years year round. So I would go to the WNBA and play in the summer, then jump on a plane as soon as it was over and run to the next country and play 8 months, then come back and play in the WNBA. So my body was exhausted. And I literally made that decision over several glasses of champagne. And I was like, that's it. I can't do this anymore. And I was happy with it. But when I wasn't playing anymore, I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. There was no planning. There was no resource in place for me, and I had no idea who I wanted to be after, I retired from my dream job playing professional sports.
Now, do you think that is this something that, whether it was your team in France or that league or WNBA or anybody else, is it any sort of their responsibility to prepare you for that, or is it somebody else's or an agent's responsibility, or should it always be on you to figure that out?
I definitely believe that you have enough people around you that you could receive some support. And I know that there are things that are in place now that were not in place many moons ago when I was actually playing. So the thing that's important is just trying to educate our athletes and understanding who they are with and without the ball, so that when they do get ready to transition, there's a plan in place. Because so many times, I mentioned earlier, when we leave the game or when the game leaves us, because I made the decision to walk away, but sometimes people walk away because of some incredible injury, or a team just cuts you, or something happens and it's out of your control. So there definitely needs to be something in place for the athletes to understand who they are without the ball, so that they can move into that next thing.
Now, I think that's something that's probably best taught almost when they start playing, right? Almost as a rookie, even, or just coming out of, look, honestly, it should be something taught even back in college, right? While you're playing there. Is what would you say would be one of the biggest sort of pieces of advice you would give a current player while they're playing, sort of to prepare for life after sport?
I think one of the things that's really important is leveraging your brand while you're still active. So many times people wait until they transition to figure out what they want to do next. And even if you don't know what it is, the relationships that you build while you're the hot ticket have so much value. You know, when I played, just, and not even because I was thinking about my future, but just because I'm a busybody and I like to talk to people and I like to meet, I went to every event that our team was hosting. I went to every opportunity that there was in the community for someone from the team to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked meeting people. So when I finally started to think, well, what can I do? I had a Rolodex of people that I could ask some questions, and I had been just maintaining contact with just because. But now, moving into the space where I assist players and understanding how they can do that, I tell them, look, I know they're having a luncheon. I want to challenge you not to sit at the table with all your teammates. Go sit with some of the people that paid to be here to actually engage with you. Learn about them, figure out how to hold a conversation, understand how to interact, and find out what it is that they do and how it could potentially serve you later. But first, see how you can serve them. If there's a way that you can do something for them, and building a healthy relationship.
Well, that's what all of this networking thing is all about, right? It's not about, hey, how can you help me? Hey, Rushia, please help me, help. It's all about, how can I help you? Because then the other person will feel compelled to want to return the favor.
Absolutely.
So and it's interesting. Virtually every athlete that I speak to, when I ask them if they have any regrets, they'll say that they wish they had started doing that relationship building, the networking, while they're still playing, and doing that a lot more because of just what you said. And it's interesting because it doesn't need to be going to a networking event and a conference and dressed in suits and ties. It's just simply, even if it's a fan event where you're just simply asking the other person, well, tell me more about what you do. It reminds me of a super quick story. And this is going back 1,000 years, maybe longer. But when I was younger, I used to go to a lot of these hobby shows, and I'd get a baseball signed by some of the older baseball players. And I'll never forget, usually you hand them the baseball and they just kind of sign their autograph and they're like, thanks, see ya, kind of thing. But this guy he takes the baseball, starts signing, he looks up and he says, well, what's your name? I said, well, my name's Mark. And this is when I was 22, 23 years old. He says, well, Mark, tell me, what do you do? What's your job or whatever? I was like, wait, you care? Like, I can't believe you actually asked that question. And he says, yeah, I'm curious to hear what you do. And I told him, and he's like, wow, that's really interesting. You know what? And I walked away going like, and to this day, it was Brooks Robinson. He's a baseball Hall of Famer, but I'll never forget that conversation. And what I tell athletes all the time is, you can have that impact on somebody like me 24 hours a day by just simply asking them one or two questions. Like, tell me more about what you do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I've had ways to connect with people over what state they live in or about their children. And then it moves into everything else. And the relationship is established, and you just never know. Like, they'll call and say, hey, I was thinking about you, this opportunity's here, and I'd love to share it with you if it's something you're interested in. So you never know where it can lead.
Absolutely. That's perfect, though. That's great. So I want to talk in a minute about the passion principles, which is something that you're passionate about. But, part of those all tie into a couple of the questions that I want to build in. So why don't we do this? Why don't you tell me, maybe we can start with this. You talk about your passion principles, and each letter stands for something. So why don't you tell me, I hope you know them all, but I'm sure you do. But I'm joking. But tell me a little bit more about the passion principles, if you could.
It's funny because the passion principles came about when I started with my nonprofit in Atlanta, Georgia. And I wanted to just really relate to the kids that I was working with, how to set themselves apart. And I just sat down and I thought about the thing that was most important to me and helping me be successful. And I found it was my passion for being successful, my passion for competing. And then I looked at each of the letters and said, so what letter can I put with each, what word can I put with each letter? And so passion is perseverance, attitude, sacrifice, setting goals, inner strength, optimism, and never giving up. And what I found is, just in all the people that I've met, no matter what field you're in, if you have all of those traits, success is at your fingertips. And it's just really about doing the work.
And so I love all of those. Those are all fantastic. But there are a couple that stand out for me. And tell me a little bit about how having the right mindset and how to have, the grit and the tenacity to push through is so important.
Yeah, it's just really important, because so many times we get stuck in a place of entitlement, or we think we should have something, but we haven't done the work. And even if we have done the work, sometimes we fall short, and then we get a negative attitude about it. And I just really understand and have come to believe, just based on my own personal experiences, that my mind guides me and my body will follow. So it really is about understanding who you are and what you want to do, and making sure that you have the proper mindset. It's just as easy to have a positive mindset as it is to have a negative. So why not do something positive? Why not open yourself up to success? Why not put yourself in a position to excel?
And, it's interesting, because I think we've all kind of been faced for the past almost a year with just each of us have had our own share of hurdles and things we've had to get through both physically and mentally and so forth. And we've all really, I think, demonstrated incredible sort of grit and tenacity to get through a lot of this. And we've all made adjustments to do that and to deal with that. But in your opinion, what do you think is going to happen in the next sort of 3 or 4 or 5 months, or whenever we all sort of, I guess, get vaccinated, we get past all this stuff? What do you see happening on the other side of that?
I am hoping that people are in this space and they're evaluating who they are and what they bring to the table, and understanding that right now is not a time to worry about the things that we don't have. It's a time to look at yourself and say, what do I have that I can adapt to, so I can monetize it, so I can add to my community, so I can do something to raise my children better? Like, what else can we bring to the table? And in spite of all the negative things that are taking place, it's really important for us to have a positive mindset, because we can get sucked into, especially being in the house all day, you can get sucked into a negative rabbit hole and no telling where that place ends. But your mindset means so much, because as we come upon this new year, with people doing their vision boards, you've got to put it out there what you want, and not just for yourself, but out into the universe, so that you can speak it into existence. And it's not just about thinking it, like sharing it with your friends, having accountability partners, writing it down, making goals for yourself, making sure that you're doing those things, and every little step, giving yourself a nice pat on the back to make sure that you can get to those goals you have.
I like the nice pat on the back. So with that said, before I go much further, actually, if any of you have any questions for Rushia or myself, and you'll see on the right side there, it says Q&A. Go click into there, type in your question. And then what I'll do is, once I see the question in there, I'll invite you in to ask it directly live to Rushia, unless you say you don't want to be invited in, but feel free to do that.
I am open to all
Wow.
questions.
All right. Including recipes?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of those.
Anyway, so next question though is, one thing you talk about, I think, is, sort of what are the right ways to set goals? Because everybody, especially in the month of January, it's all about resolutions. It's all about, in 2021, I'm going to whatever, lose this weight or do this or do that. I want to be careful how I say this. I tend to not really be a big fan of resolutions, because you might as well just say, I'm going to have a goal that's going to blow up in the next couple of weeks, so don't even bother. But how do you think is the best way to set goals for yourself?
I'll give you this analogy. What's the best way to eat an elephant?
Yeah, bite at a time.
One
Yeah.
bite at a time. So it's really about just setting short-term goals that lead to your ultimate long-term goals. Like, you're not going to lose 20 pounds in the one day. Okay, so you just got to really figure out, how do I lose a little bit at a time? If it's 8 ounces, if it's 1 pound. So just look at things and not put so much onus on getting it all done at once. And I think a lot of times we look so far ahead, and it goes back to my saying, even for the little steps, give yourself a little pat on the back, even for the small steps, because all of those small steps together still help you make that journey and get to that ultimate goal. And it's really about just making sure that you put things in place, short-term goals moving into long-term goals.
And it's interesting. I'm going to admit to something that I went through myself. So I spend my day giving people lots of advice and how to get past this and how to do that and also that sort of thing. But there was a point, maybe a year or so ago, when I was kind of getting a little mopey. I was kind of thinking, God, this is so darn hard to do all this stuff that I'm doing and everything. And then I actually did just take a minute to sort of sit back and think, well, wait a minute. But in the last year, or last 6 months or whatever it is, I launched a podcast, I wrote a book, I did all this stuff. So I think it's almost a good analogy is suggesting, that if you're climbing up a mountain and then you're huffing and puffing, man, this is tough. And you're halfway up and you look up and you're like, oh crap, like the clouds cleared and you're like, oh, I still have to go another, whatever it is. Right. But sometimes it's okay to look behind you and say, wow, look how far I've climbed. Right.
Absolutely. I subscribe to that theory heavily, because so many times we're so focused on where we're going, we don't realize the distance that we've covered. And it's what's so funny about goals and the time that we put on them. If I don't do anything between today and February 15th, February 15th is coming anyway. So why not do something in between to make sure I'm accomplishing something, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's not, 6 months worth of work. Just do a little bit every day and you'll gain that success.
That's awesome. One of the things I know you mentioned, and I want to jump on this a little bit, is, you talk about the whole notion of looking inside yourself for support. Because is it because you shouldn't rely on others to do that for you? Or, why do you think you should do that?
Yeah, so that falls under our inner strength. And the thing that I've learned is, no matter what I try to accomplish, I'm still the one that has to do the work. So there won't always be my mom or my brother or my friends or my family there to cheer me on. I have to believe that I'm capable. I have to know that if I do the work, that I can establish myself and I can accomplish certain goals. I can't put it on anybody else. And a lot of times that's the easy way to do it, because it's so easy to blame other people for not being there for us. But the key thing is that we have to be there for ourselves and make sure that we're utilizing the resources that are around us. I absolutely feed off of the support from my family. I absolutely need them, but they can't, when I played, none of them were in the gym with me. I took my brother once and it was not a good experience. He's not an athlete. However, just understanding that, you're responsible for that. And so accountability really plays a huge part.
Sort of accountability is so important, because there's look, for a long time, I was just doing everything by myself, and it wasn't, I was doing the coaching, I was doing everything else, that there wasn't someone else to say, hey, you should, blah, 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 whatever it is, the account. But now that I'm building a team around me, yeah, there's other people that sort of smack me around a little bit, maybe because I deserve it, but I guess I get that because of, but it's something that really keeps you within your lane, which is nice. So I think that's really interesting. So I'm going to ask Dawn to come in and ask this question, because it's a good question. And I'm going to just go ahead and invite Dawn in to ask us directly. I hope she doesn't mind. So Dawn, come on in. All you got to do is just click on that little button that says come on in and you can ask your question.
Hi, I wasn't scared to be brought in, so thank you. So yeah, my question was just, Rushia, you talked about the work that you do with former athletes and really trying to help them develop what direction they're heading. And I was wondering if there were any specific tools that you used around career interest and aptitude surveys to help them figure out, either through an online survey or a conversation with you, what else that they're interested in outside of the current sport that they're playing, and also what else are they really good at also to help them make that next step in the transition.
You know, Dawn, the thing that I found most effective is the conversation, because I can pull something out of them without it being like 21 questions. Whereas even though I absolutely agree that, you know, like certain cumulative testing needs to be in place, we have the DISC that one of our former players, Yolanda Moore, was doing these surveys and sending it around to players, and then she would assess them to help them figure things out. But whenever it seems like a task, I found that a lot of times they don't really want to go into it, because even the DISC test, you got to answer 600 questions, a pain in the butt. It's very, you know, it's helpful, but just in that moment, it's not something that people want to do. So just the fact that I've had an opportunity to just sit and have a conversation, ask them, you know, what do you do in your spare time? When you were little, what do you think you would be when you grew up? What does your family do? What did they think you would be when you grow up? Just random conversations that they're unarmed. You know, they have their guard down and they're just sharing. And then say, well, so what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money? If you weren't worried about a job, just what would you do all day? And just let them speak to that and say, okay, then we look at what opportunities could come from those things that they're passionate about. But definitely, I agree that the testing, like DISC, I think is really important to understand for yourself. But it's just really difficult to get them to, you know, take it seriously and give themselves a chance to complete
that
it.
DISC is an acronym for something.
Mm-hmm. And
Don't
I
worry
can't
about
tell
it.
you what
I'll
it is,
look
but
it
it's
Well, and just to piggyback on that, I completely agree with Rushia. I think that one of the things I talk about, whether it's with athletes or non-athletes, executives, doesn't matter who, you know, I'm a firm believer that everybody should be waking up every single morning excited to do what they're doing and fired up and love doing what they're doing. And, you know, some people say, oh, but I'm just out of school, or I need to, but it doesn't matter. At any age, you can be talking to people that can get you into the jobs and the businesses that you really love doing. And it's just, I tell people all the time, why do you spend so much time chasing after things that you're just going to settle for, when you can invest the same amount of time chasing something you'd love to do? And Rushia, just as you said, when, I'll say to people, look, here's a check for whatever that amount, $100,000. What would you do to earn that check? What would you love to do? Not, something that you can do, but what would you love to do? And that's what it really unearths, as you said, having conversations with a lot of them to say, well, you know what, if I had a chance, I'd love to be in fashion. I'd love to be in first responder. I'd love to be cutting down trees, a forestry person. I'd love to, it doesn't matter. But the point is that we all have things that we'd love to do if given the opportunity. And I say, look, there are ways to attending events like this and doing other networking that will allow for those opportunities to happen.
And it's so funny, and I share this story now, but when I first started with the WPBAA, it was because one of my sisters needed help. And I've always been a person of service. I wanted to make sure that I could accommodate people however I could, help them getting to the next step. But she had been a two-time WNBA All-Star. She played internationally and in the WNBA, and we were in Houston playing at a celebrity game, and we found out she was homeless. And so this blows my mind. I'm like, how does this happen? Who can I call? We're about to fix this. So I go to the league, and they tell me, well, we focus on the current players. And then I approached the NBRPA, and their board didn't agree that the women fell under the same umbrella. But luckily, Charles Smith, who was the executive director, was like, Rushia, I'll help you form something. And that ended up being, and I did that without pay for about 8 years. Not because it was a job, but I loved seeing the women transition. I wanted to help them. I saw them find themselves, and that was fulfilling to me. And in January 2018, I got a call, and I hear, hi, Rushia, this is Bill Langbeer. And I'm like, what? I've never played for him, against him, had any interaction. But because of the work that I had done, he'd heard about me and he wanted his current players to have that opportunity. So though I wasn't making money, it was something that I was doing out of my heart because I loved it. My gift rate made room for me. And I ended up getting a job and the opportunities opened, and I ended up having that job with the Aces that no other team has. And so it's just really about finding that thing that you love that you would get up and do for free, because that's what I did. I did it for free. I hosted events, I made connections, I found the resources. I did it all because I wanted to be doing it. And it was never like working. So when I actually got a job and got benefits and a salary and insurance, I was excited, because I was still doing the same thing with more resources. So I think that, like you said, the conversations are really necessary and important to help people find out what they would do if nothing else mattered. Just what do you love? And then you move in that
I had
space.
a follow-up question, Mark. Am I allowed, or do I have to?
Yeah, of course. Well, let me check. Yes, you are. Yeah.
I don't mind getting back in line.
No, go for it. Go ahead, please.
Well, so do you ever hear any of them have issues with the stigma associated with working in a position that may not be as glamorous and high profile as what they were used to, but it really is what they want to do, and they're fighting against it because they're concerned that they're not going to be on the same status level or pay level that they were when they were working professional sports?
The one thing that I find, yes, the answer is yes. And I will use myself as an example. When I first retired, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I loved working with kids. And a friend of mine was the executive director at the Boys and Girls Club, and she didn't have somebody in the gym. And I was like, I would love to come down here and work with the kids. And I was like, you gonna pay me how much? I can't give you my all day, every day for like $12. Like, I thought that was obscene. And so in my mind, I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, I ain't doing nothing. I come down here and mess with these kids anyway. So let me just go ahead and do this in the meantime. But definitely there are those that are thinking that the amount of money they earn has to match what it was before. And I say, like that, we have lived a privileged life. Even as the female athletes that don't make the millions, you still make more than the average person that has a regular job. So it's really about understanding the mindset and preparing yourself to be happy in the space that you want to be, and not comparing yourself to everybody else's journey. But that is a problem.
That is a great question, because I think that most athletes, and again, it can be male or female, like you said, Rushia, most athletes do pretty well. Some do incredibly well and others do barely to get by. But the point is that I think that it's almost less about the money and more about the fact that they were an elite athlete. They were at the top of their game. They were at the top of everything. And now suddenly they're not necessarily the top person at a company, right? So what ends up happening is that, but what I like to try to do is loop it back around and say, look, it's because of the fact that you're an elite athlete that you can train yourself to be elite again in what you really enjoy doing. And
Absolutely.
your rate of climbing the ladder and becoming better will be better than most of those people that weren't athletes before, because you've been experienced in becoming elite. So, yep. So I hope that answered a little bit, Dawn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for being in here. I appreciate it. And we'll see you a little bit more out at the tables. Thanks again.
You.
Of course. My pleasure. So if anybody else, by the way, has any questions, make sure you do the same thing and throw it in the Q&A section for either of us. So one thing I've been accused of is being too sort of pie in the sky, positive, cup is half full all the time and all this sort of thing. Well, one of the things I like to say is, the cup that's half full gets full faster, and, benefits come that way. But, and people say, well, Mark, I'm not, you're not a realist and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, that's no fun. But tell me a little bit about what's the difference between being sort of that cup half full and having that positive mindset?
It's so funny because so many times, I mentioned earlier, just as easy as it is to be positive, it's the same to be negative. So why not put yourself in a position to gain something? And regarding your optimism, when you are optimistic, you have a mindset that makes you see the good in everything. And I'll share a personal story from my college experience. When I was a freshman at Furman, I went in and I had the best year in conference history. So my goal, because I had been chartered to be like a Naismith All-American the following year, So that summer, I worked out every summer. I mean, with every team, the volleyball team was working out. I worked out with them. The football team, the basketball, anybody who was working out that was a sport at that school, I worked out with them. So what I did, I was in the best shape of my life. 4 games into the season, I go to reach for a steal, and at this time, I'm literally just 4 games in. I'm averaging like 25 and 12. So I'm off to a great start. I go to reach for a steal. 2 other girls go for it. They fall down on my arm, dislocate my shoulder, tear my rotator cuff.
Oh.
My season is over. All of the work that I put in seemingly went down the drain. And it was my right shoulder, so my dominant arm. And after I cried, I have to admit, like I was heartbroken because I put so much work in. But instead of focusing on what I lost, I had to figure out what next. So I started dribbling with my left hand, passing the ball with my left, shooting with my left, everything with my left hand because this arm was pinned to my body. After those 4.5 months, everything I can do with my right, I can now do with my left. It's about turning your negative into a positive. And had this not been taken away from me, I don't know if I ever would have worked on my left hand because I'm killing you with this right. So why would I never even thought about it, but it took it being taken away. So the thing that I learned, a life lesson, is that it's not always about a loss. It's about a lesson. How can I use this to get that opportunity and be even better? So when a job comes up or something that I want to do and I don't get it, okay, so what was I missing? How can I create an opportunity for myself to be better prepared for the next time? And it's all about that little switch in your mind because now it makes you work harder. Because it would be fun for me. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this move and they're used to me going to the right, but I'm going to come back and do it to the left. And then it became a game. So we have to play little mind games with ourselves, but definitely the mindset is extremely important about understanding how to get to that next thing, even when things don't go your way.
Interestingly, I think a lot of people nowadays are saying that they're finding silver linings in all this pandemic stuff where, obviously we've been prevented from doing lots of things, but at the same time, we've had maybe more family time or more time to be introspective about other things or learning things. And so it's always about, I think trying to find the silver lining because I also think, and this is going to sound crazy, but I'm just going to say it. I've always thought also people that are positive tend to age slower, They just seem younger and full of more energy. And I like to tell people that, I have a belief that some people, every day it's 24 hours, but every day some people age 30 hours and other people age 18 hours. It's just like, right? So I kind of feel like I'm younger than I am. And, but I've known other people my age that look like they're ancient. And it's just like, because their first reaction is always a negative one or pessimistic about stuff. And to me, cup half full means, hopefully a longer everything. Right. So, but that's so great. So I'm going to invite Barry in here to ask this question because it's I think a very important one. And I know you'll have a nice answer for this, Rushia. So Barry, come on in and join us. It's that awkward pause where we're waiting for that thing to go bing, show up. And I'm not sure if that means he can or he can't. Oh, there you go, Barry. All right, you're in.
Go. I got all the buttons pressed.
Cool.
All right, Rushia, thanks. I'm going to take I'll tell you your story about the work you did to form the organization and 8 years unpaid in a labor of love. As someone who's on that same journey now in my 11th year with co-founders doing that, that felt really good in my heart to hear you say that. And I would love to be in a position to get paid someday for it, but it's a passion and an honor to be able to do it. And so to hear somebody else who's been on that journey, it's really uplifting.
Awesome.
So my question, you bet. My question is really around making that connection between athletes and in the community. Certainly my assessment is athletes are, increasingly more involved in philanthropy, in service in the community. In the last year has just shown social justice in so many different fronts. How do you advise athletes on how to get engaged, and maybe with whom to get engaged, the positives, the potential pitfalls of doing that. And conversely, if you were going to hypothetically advise someone in the nonprofit space on how to best engage athletes and what they're looking for in that relationship, what would you advise?
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Barry. And it's really important to me. That's something that I feel athletes have a platform to give them an opportunity to impact change. And for me, starting with a current athlete, I would say just figure out the things that are important to you, per se, the space that you want to work in. I've always loved working with young girls and helping them figure out, because I struggled as a young lady. So I wanted to be what I needed. So I always volunteered in spaces where I could share my experience and be, transparent with them about, look, it was some pretty crappy times, but I made it through and you can too. So where somebody else, one of the young ladies that plays for the Sparks, her cousin was killed. And so she is about gun violence. So it just really depends on what your personal engagement has been and what's led you to a certain time and space where you want to impact change. And if you're playing for a team, you just tell whoever's your CR, like, this is what I want to do. We had an experience this year with it being a huge voting year. Chelsea Gray wanted to educate the LGBTQ community as well as the young African-American community. And she called our president. The president called me and was like, Rushia, Chelsea wants to do something. I was like, okay. So we called Rock the Vote in Equality, California. We put together a program for her. She donated money for every assist. And then even with that, we had other people donate and we were able to educate and fulfill what she wants. So if you're a current athlete, it should be pretty easy. You go to your CR team and tell them what you want to do. And they're the ones that vet the organizations. If you've retired, then the work becomes your own. And because it's really important that you don't tie your name to someone who's not doing the proper work and doing things the right way. So it's about doing the research and seeing what have they done? What has their impact been? Is this somebody that I would align my brand with? So that for the athlete seeking, and for the organization, have your ducks in a row. Make sure that all the things that you're doing are documented. Make sure that your website is where they can go and look, and make sure that you are exactly who you say you are. So many times, I'm trying to think of who it was saying, who was you? You were saying you wouldn't feel comfortable saying y'all because you feel like a poser. There are a lot of posers out here, that are saying, hey, this is what I do, but you can't find one event that they've hosted that's impacted change in their community because it's about the money or they're not doing things properly. So as a former athlete where you don't have access to the community resource center, you make sure you do the work, but as an organization, you got to make sure that you are aligning yourself and doing the proper things, because it's just like a kid getting ready to go to college. What about you is going to make them want to be associated with you? So you got to have everything taken care of ahead of time.
I'd just throw in there is that the whole idea that if you're an organization looking for athletes to be involved, really do the research on that side too. Don't just spray out there and ask every athlete, because try to I always say, look at things from the other person's perspective and think, well, which of the athletes out there might fit your mission and the people you're trying to impact and affect and so forth. So if it's, again, whether it's an organization like Every Kid Sports, well, if you know some kids in your neighborhood that are struggling and they really want to play, but they can't, then that's great. Then, then you go after their parents, you just try to think about which of the athletes are going to really want to engage with certain things. And you may see some athletes are involved quite a bit in their communities and others are not. So I think it's all about targeting and but just being genuine with that targeting. So.
And the good thing about that is that athletes that are active are usually visible. Like you have a few that kind of hide behind the scenes and do things low key, but the majority of them do them, are high profile and on TV and camera and pictures. And so you can find them. You can easily access what they're doing and who they're doing it with. So if you want to align your brand with them, you got to make sure that you're in that same space.
Oh, that's a great question, Barry. Thanks so much
Thank you, Rushia.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you both.
Of course, thanks. So Rushia, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bounce back in a second to the tables. I want you to still have a chance to chat with a few more people. But this has been absolutely fantastic. And I think, I'll ask you, I think we covered a lot of the passion principles. And there's a lot more. So I encourage everyone to have the opportunity to reach out to you directly and speak to you, whether it's really supporting the work that you're doing on behalf of the Sparks, on behalf of the retired women's basketball players, the professional ones. Also, tell me a little bit about, I know you want to impact young girls that are playing and so forth, but tell me a little bit about what you're hoping to do with that.
I always find a space to try and give back to the young ladies. And one of the things this pandemic has allowed me to do was be creative and find a new space. So I created a program called Boss Girls. And it is a virtual program where I'll be able to mentor young ladies on how to be a boss. But boss is another acronym. I'm a fan of acronyms. So it's brilliant, ambitious, worthy, strong, and educated. And understanding that each life that our life is meant to impact the lives of others. And so it's not just about us. It's not about comparing our journey, but it's about uplifting ourselves and the young lady to my left and my right and making sure that we're doing great things. So I just love pouring into our youth. And I'll even admit, when this first started happening and the world shut down, I was, I was cringing because I love being in front of the kids. I love engaging and interacting and helping them be their best selves. And I couldn't do that. So I was stuck in the house.
Right.
And so I started to even feel weird about, where I was. So I could only imagine what they were going through in their respective situations. So I love doing that. And that's something that I'm working on now.
That's incredible. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Absolutely. So my website is RushiaBrown.com. Of course, I'm social media. Everything is Rushia B. And you can follow me there I will warn you, it's all very straightforward and honest conversation. And I love engagement and interaction. Just really love to share ideas and mindsets with other people just to get to know. And we talked earlier in one of the rooms at one of the tables about my playing internationally. And you even mentioned it here, going someplace where you don't speak the language. I think the time that I spent in these other countries really helped me develop as the woman I am, because I was able to be in a space where I had no idea what was going on, but I didn't see myself, because I was the American, as better than them. I said, okay, so how do I eat this? I had some friends that were African, they ate with their fingers. I was like, okay, what do we do? I allowed myself to live in their culture. And I think that's really important for people to embrace people for who they are and not look at it just because it's different. Look at the similarities and how we can continue to do more together.
Korean.
안녕하세요. That's all I know. I know like 5 words.
What's that? Can I have a beer now? I don't know what you said.
No, I don't drink beer. 안녕하세요 is just good morning. Hello.
That's
it's
great.
Just a greeting.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, Nick, quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this club room?
I think this is really interesting. I love the way that you get to chat and bounce around from table to table in the beginning. And as you mentioned, we'll do that again here at the end, but also in the middle have the presentation part. So I love the platform. I think it's really exciting, and I look forward to being able to engage even more. And I know I wanted to go through this again. Did you have another question, or can I share something?
Oh, please do. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I know I talked about what each of the letters meant, but I just wanted to go into it a little bit more. So your P was your perseverance, just understanding that life happens, things go wrong, but when those things go wrong, you got to figure out how to get back on track and not allow yourself to stay gone for so long. Your A is attitude. And that just means, be the person that other people want to help and assist. You walk into a room, somebody may judge you before you even open up your mouth, but your energy and how you carry yourself really impacts how people receive you. So just always be aware of the things that you're doing and where you are, because you never know. I told the story about Bill and how he called me randomly, but that was over a referral because other people had seen me. And just make sure that you're representing your best self at all times with your attitude. Your sacrifice, understanding the difference between what I want and what I need. When I didn't pick up a ball, we talked about me starting to play in the 10th grade. Prior to that, I was hanging out with my friends all the time. Once I started playing, I needed to be in the gym. So even though I wanted to go to the beach, I wanted to hang out at the mall, I wanted to do all those things with them, I needed to be in the gym working out. I needed to go work out and be on these travel teams. And we hear, I won't say how many years later, some of them are still paying college student loans. Whereas I was able to go to school for free. So the difference between what I want and what I need. Your I is inner strength. We spoke to that. understanding that you are the one that's responsible. No matter how much my mom loved me, she couldn't do the work for me. So you got to believe in yourself first. Your O is optimism. We talked about having that positive mindset. I shared about my shoulder and just making sure even when a negative thing happens, you figure out how to get to that space where you turn it into a lesson. And our N is never giving up. We just can't quit. And I think a lot of times we think, we want our life to look a certain way and have certain things in it, but it doesn't always happen the way that we planned. So even when it doesn't happen, you got to keep going, because the only time that you fail is when you quit. So I just am appreciative of those that have joined and understand that your passion is the thing that's going to get you over the top, no matter what field you're in. Understand that this is all about you and the people that you impact. This world that we live in, especially today, is about making sure that we walk in our passion and do the things. Like you said, if we wake up in the morning doing something we love, you never work a day in your life.
What better way to end this? This is perfect. That was great. Well, I truly appreciate you being here, Rushia, and you've got so much wisdom that you've really pulled from your years playing and then your years after the game. So thanks so much for being here. And when we go back to the tables, we'll be able to chat some more. But I appreciate your time. And one other quick note: we're going to put in the general chat in a few minutes the ability to register for our future events, the ability to join the academy, and also the links to Rushia's website we'll put in there. And so we'll be able to just check that out at any point. But we'll go back to the tables now. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
My pleasure. All right. Thank you.